You're listening to the Fierce Fatty Podcast, episode 135. Food addiction? Sugar addiction? CARBS addiction? Oh my goodness, let's do it.
Perfect.
Hello and welcome to this episode. Did you miss me? Did you miss me? Did you think I was dead? I'm not dead. Woo! Hey! So I had a few weeks off, unexpected. It was my birthday, so I was like, fuck it. This Leo needs like a month off. It wasn't a month, it was 2 weeks, but there was 1 week where I was too busy to record the podcast. Anyway, so thanks for hanging around. Thanks for coming back for this new episode, if you were waiting with breath that was bated, or maybe you didn't even notice. Maybe you listen to this years from now and you're like, what are you talking about? Anyway, hi. It's about 50 billion degrees today, so we've got a couple of fans going. Hopefully they're not too noisy in the background there. I want to start off first with someone sent me a DM and was responding to, I can't remember what episode it was, but in the episode I was talking about that film, Super Size Me. Do you remember that film? Where Morgan Spurlock was the guy who filmed himself only eating McDonald's for I don't know how long, and then afterwards the doctor looked at his body and was like, your body is fucked up. And there was something like, you're going into liver failure. And they were like, see, this is what McDonald's does. If you eat McDonald's, you're going to go into liver failure and die. Anyway, someone emailed me and said, actually, it came out, Morgan Spurlock revealed that he was a heavy alcohol user at the time and had been since he was a teenager. And so that's why his liver was in not good shape, but they didn't reveal that in the movie because then they wouldn't be able to blame McDonald's for killing people, I guess. So I thought that was interesting. I was like, well. Who knows? Whatever. Just a little tidbit. Let's just call it tidbit from now on. A little tidbit for you. Another thing that's came out recently is the FAA, the Federal Airline Authority, American Airline Authority, basically. Federal American Airlines, who the fuck knows? Anyway, they have said, listen up here, we want to know how big you think the seats need to be for safety, right? I got an email from Anne who says, my name is Anne, I'm a fatty from Brookline, or Brooklyn. No, it's not Brooklyn, as in, it's NH, New Hampshire, I'm guessing. I've been following you on Instagram for a while now, and I love how passionately you advocate for all of us fatties. That's what I thought of you when this opportunity arose. So she says, as part of the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018, the U.S. Federal Aviation Association, well, there you go, that's what it is. Federal U.S. Aviation Association is asking for public feedback on airplane seat size. They have stressed that the opinions they are looking for need to be related specifically to passenger safety during an emergency, not comfort. According to CNN, the FAA conducted several simulated emergency evacuations in 2019 and 2020, and based on those simulations, they have decided that seat size and spacing did not adversely affect the success of emergency evacuations. However, these simulations were conducted on using, quote, able-bodied adult subjects younger than 60. Obviously, larger people have much more difficulty moving through airplanes because of the narrow aisles and tight rows, but it seems that the FAA doesn't feel that they need to take this into consideration, even though almost 75% of Americans are fat. So I filed a complaint with them and I shared the link to Twitter. Here's that link. And so Anne is saying, here's the links for the comments that you can make for the it's regulations.gov, and Anne's left a great comment, so you can even just like kind of copy what Anne has done and then leave a comment. We've got almost 10,000 comments there, so the more comments the better. And some people are not are saying, oh, I'm tall, and so it makes it uncomfortable. These motherfuckers don't care about your comfort. They care about getting sued because the seats are too close together and fat people can't get out. That's what it's about, right? They're probably scared about losing money. It's probably about money, right? So you need to say how fat folks are going to be trapped in an airplane if they can't get out because the seats are so tiny. And even straight size people, shit, man, like it's like the width between the seats, you know, the leg room, it's like as wide as a slice of paper, you know. There's nothing there. So if you are a straight size person listening right now, please go to the link in the show notes, which is fiercefactor.com/135, fiercefactor.com/135 for episode 135. If you don't remember, it's always fiercefactor.com/podcast, and leave a comment. That will be your act of allyship for today. And leave a comment and say it's way too tiny, even I as a small person, or it should be this big, we need to be safe, fat people need to be safe. If you want to and you're a fat person, you can do the same thing. You can go and look at Anne's comment. I'll leave the link for Anne's comment too, and you can kind of see what she's written because it's good, right? Okay, so today's episode is talking about food addiction, sugar addiction, carbs addiction, and I've spoken about this previously, but it was quite a while ago, and so maybe new listeners haven't heard it, or you've probably forgotten even if you've listened already, but I'm adding in new things. But shit, like I can't even remember the episodes I've done, so how are you how are you meant to remember? People are like, oh, remember that episode you did about blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, nope. Like, I remember some of the key ones, but most of it, I don't remember what I've even spoken about. So why am I expecting you to remember every single word I've ever said? And anyway, we can talk about, you know, the same topics in different ways, and it's all good. Yeah, so the idea of food addiction or sugar addiction or carb addiction or any type of subset of food addiction, I was thinking about it because, you know, I did the episode with Summer Innanen on JVN, Jonathan Van Ness, and their TV show. It is called Curious. I think it's called Getting Curious with JVN. JVN uses he, they, she. Does she? Oh shit! I can't look them up because he's blocked me on he's blocked me on Instagram after they heard the episode, or probably didn't hear the episode. They saw that I had tagged him in a post. Anyway, so I'm going to be using they, him pronouns for JVN, just an FYI. So in this episode, there was a dietitian who was like, let's talk about food addiction. And JVN's like, yes, tell me more about it. And she's like, let's look at the science. This is your brain on sugar. And then it was like, oh, jokes. This is like, oh no, cocaine. This is people's brains on cocaine. It's the same. You're basically addicted to sugar, food. You are a out of control person. Oh my God, you need to go on a diet. And wanting to kind of talk about this more, go in depth more, because I guarantee there are people listening being like, well, I think I'm a food addict. I think I'm a sugar addict. I feel like JVN. And he was saying how they were sneaking food at nighttime, or not eating any food all day long, and then at the end of the night being like, oh, I ate some food. Now to me, as someone who talks about this stuff, I'm like, okay, it seems really obvious that you just need to eat some food. But I know that it can be very distressing for a lot of people. And in fact, I had a history with really feeling like I was a food addict. I really felt like I should be going to OA, Overeaters Anonymous, because I felt so out of control with food. I was obsessed with it. It was the first thing that I thought of when I woke up in the morning, saying, praise baby Jesus, I can eat some breakfast. And then it would be like, okay, well, I've had my measly breakfast. Now, how long is it until I can have lunch? How many hours? Oh, is it almost there? I can't wait to eat. And obviously it seems very clear at the time to me that there was something wrong with me and I was addicted to food. It makes sense, right? Because you're having these feelings of I can't wait to wake up in the morning so I'm allowed to eat, and I wish I could eat more food, and dreaming about food. So, and then when you think about what is the common rhetoric around this stuff, so the common rhetoric, I did a little bit of looking up, seeing what people are saying nowadays about it. At that time, that was, oh my goodness, 20 years ago now, when that was really difficult for me. It is most places are saying, listen, it's not a real thing, like as in it's not recognized as an addiction, but it's an addiction is what people are saying. So this is from WebMD, who says the idea that a person can be addicted to food has recently gained increasing support. That comes from brain imaging and other studies of the effects of compulsive overeating on the pleasure centers in the brain. Experiments in animals. Now, if you listen to that last episode, that should be a little ding, 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 ding. It should have gone off when I said that. Experiments in animals, ding, 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 and humans show that for some people, the same reward and pleasure centers of the brain that are triggered by addictive drugs like cocaine and heroin are also activated by food, especially highly palatable foods. So they're saying, okay, well, we've got science to show that food has the same effect as cocaine and heroin. Okay. Compulsive overeating is a type of behavioral addiction. So okay, so we've got the chemical addiction and then the behavioral addiction. So compulsive overeating is a type of behavioral addiction, meaning that someone can become preoccupied with a behavior such as eating, gambling, or shopping that triggers intense pleasure. People with food addictions lose control over their eating behavior and find themselves spending excessive amounts of time involved with food and overeating and anticipating the emotional effects of compulsive overeating. So if you're reading that stuff as someone who, you know, is struggling, or who's, you know, someone who's just interested, you'd be like, yeah, that sounds about right. But let's use our critical thinking skills. Let's look at a little bit more. Let's do a little bit more research. Okay, so we've got another article, which is the 8 symptoms of food addiction. And they say here, while food addiction is not listed in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM-5, so that's the big book that therapists and psychologists and psychotherapists will have, that will tell you, oh, this is what bipolar is, this is bipolar 1, this is what depression is, this is the symptoms. This is like this huge big Bible of mental health stuff. So the DSM, it typically so while food addiction is not listed in the DSM, it typically involves binge eating behaviors, cravings, and a lack of control around food. Interesting. While someone gets a craving or overeats occasionally, probably won't fit the criteria for the disorder. There are at least 8 common symptoms. Okay, so now they're calling it a disorder when it's not in the DSM-5. But here we've got 8 symptoms. So let's have a look what Healthline says the 8 symptoms of food addiction is. Getting cravings despite being full. getting cravings despite being full. Could that be because you've eaten the wrong things? Like if you are like, oh, I really fancy a cheese toastie, and instead you had a salad sandwich, you could be full on having a salad sandwich, theoretically, and also still crave a cheese toastie, because really you were looking for that crunchy outside, the warm gooey middle, little bit salty, little bit of tomato sauce, and instead you had a salad sandwich. Does not match. Softer. You might have a bit of crunch from the stuff inside. I like a good salad sandwich, me, but if I was craving a cheese toastie, even if I was full, I'd still crave it. Okay, that doesn't mean that I am addicted to cheese toasties. Next one is eating more than intended. Okay, so eating more than intended is a really common occurrence, and people do it often, and it is not pathologized. For example, you go out to a nice restaurant with your spouse. You have a few glasses of wine, you have a really nice meal. At the end, you're like, oh, I really feel full. You're not then being like, oh my God, someone's a food addict. And, think about like Christmas dinner, you're getting full then. Thinking about, so, you've got this really yummy thing and you eat more than feels comfortable. Yes, there is the, when we're doing more than serves us, then we can talk about it. But eating much more than intended, is what they're saying here, is not inherently a harmful thing, right? Eating until feeling excessively stuffed. Okay, so this too could be something else. We're going to talk about that in a moment. But it's, for a lot of folks, this is just a normal behavior. Some folks it's not, it doesn't feel good, and there's other things that's going on behind that, but it's not addiction that's behind that. Okay, the next one, feeling guilty afterward, but doing it again soon. Feeling guilty after eating food? Wonder where that comes from. Diet culture and fat phobia. That's what's happening there, because we shouldn't feel guilty for eating. So that's a symptom of being in a fat-phobic diet culture society. Making up excuses. Let me see what they say about this. Brain can be a strange thing, especially in regards to addiction. Deciding to stay away from trigger foods can cause someone to create rules for themselves, yet these rules may be hard to follow. When faced with craving, someone with a food addiction might find ways to reason around the rules and give in to the craving. Okay, so that's just a natural response to restriction. Because you cannot fight it. Your body is doing some incredible things. If you are restricting, if you are saying, I'm not going to have that food that I am, quote, addicted to, your brain is going to be like, bitch, give me that thing. And doing all sorts of, we're going to talk about it in a sec, what it's doing exactly to get you to eat that thing. And it's not that you're addicted. It's because your body is like, okay, well, they've told me I'm not allowed to eat it. Watch me. I'm gonna get them to eat it. That's what your brain is saying. 6, repeated failures at setting rules. Oh my God, like why the fuck do we need to have rules around food? Yeah, bye. 7, hiding eating from others. Okay, so it could be that we've got an eating disorder on our hands that we're going to be talking about more in a moment, or it could be that as fat people, or people who have other marginalized identities, especially if you're a supersized fat person, eating is not safe to do in front of other people. So, hiding eating from others, a lot of times it's because it's not safe, you don't want judgment, and you feel shame around the fact that you're eating for whatever reason, which is, it could be something that's going on there which is a little bit deeper, which is disordered eating or an eating disorder. It could be diet culture, right? Number 8, unable to quit despite physical problems. Oh, well, hello, we're not able to quit eating food. We would then become dead. There. Hello. And the more that we say, okay, well, I'm going to eat only, quote, good food, the more we do that, then all of the stuff that our bodies do to get us to eat the food that we're restricting is going to really ramp up until we're like, fine, I'm going to give in, I'm going to eat the food, right? Right? And they say physical problems. In the short term, quote, I'm not going to say what they say, food can lead to weight gain, acne. What? Bad breath. Oh, for fuck's sake. Fatigue, poor dental health, and other common problems. So why don't you just stop eating food, you fat bastard? Like, what the... Oh my God, eating food apparently is going to give you Alzheimer's, dementia, and cancer? Healthline? What are you saying? This is just... They just come up with all sorts of shit, don't they? Oh my goodness. Anyway, okay, continue. Okay, so that's what that one says. And so for me, those 8 signs sounds like if someone says that I'm hiding what I'm eating, and I'm not able to stop eating food, and I really crave it, I would say, can you go to a therapist? Because it sounds like maybe you might have an eating disorder, disordered eating, or are just a victim, not just, but you're a victim of diet culture, as is pretty much everyone. I feel like most people have disordered eating, and it's so normalized that we don't even realize it. Okay, so this one, Medical News Today, says they I think what they've said is a little bit more down to earth, a little bit more, not you. If you eat food, you're gonna like, oh dear. So they say the human body needs food to provide energy and nutrition. Great, thank you. That's the first time we've had that. However, people can feel addicted to food when they become dependent. I don't know, I'm not sure of that word, dependent, on certain types of foods. Any food can make a person feel addictive tendencies. Yes, and that's the thing. It can really feel like we're addicted, right? And if we try and stop eating that food, then that's when the feeling of being addicted is really heightened. And if we think about addiction to different substances, like opioids or whatever, and we think about what happens in those situations when someone doesn't have or isn't able to access the substances that they normally use, and what difficult things that they go through. And we can see it's different. It's a preoccupation that we might have with food, but our body is not going through this withdrawal or this do anything to get it, that you would with things that are actually chemically addictive. And it's just a big thing here. Addiction is it's an illness, right? It's a mental health condition, and so being addicted doesn't mean that you're a bad person. Any type of addiction, even if you feel like you are addicted to sugar or food or whatever, or if someone is addicted to other substances, they're not a bad person. It is something that a very complicated topic. It's something that's really one side is very encouraged in our culture. If you think about substances like alcohol, how that consumption is really encouraged, whereas other things it's very stigmatized. And if someone says I use alcohol versus someone who says I use heroin, what we would think about those two people and the stigma that the person who uses heroin would face versus someone who uses alcohol. And really, both are maybe, and the thing is, you could use alcohol and it's not a big deal, right? You could just be like, I enjoy this, right? And if someone is enjoying other types of substances and it works for them and their life is functioning and whatever, who are we to say you shouldn't be doing that, And I think about that with the food stuff, right? Is why do people do certain things? Whatever it is, it's, for us to live, survive, thrive, be happy, experience joy, whatever. And if I think about when I was in my stage where I thought I was addicted to food, I was trying to survive an abusive relationship. And it was literally one of the only joys that I had. Literally. And the amount of joy that I felt from food that I snuck was something that kept me alive. And so was that a negative thing? At the time, I thought it was deeply shameful and awful. And now I'm like, thank fuck for what I discovered was actually an eating disorder. Because it saved me. It means that I'm alive today, whereas who knows what could have happened. So let's see what people say about sugar addiction. So sugar consumption can create a short-term high and a spark of energy in the body. Some studies have suggested sugar is as addictive as cocaine. Have they? Have they? Where's your link? This is from addictioncenter.com. Do they link back to the studies? No, they don't. Are studies saying this? No. No. So what we know, and it's well established, and therapists and people will say, listen, studies have been done on human brains to see what happens when they eat food or have sugar or whatever, and it lights up. And so it's like, dun dun dun, it lights up. Aha, evidence that we have a food addict on our hands. And okay, now let's get them to have a hug from someone they love. Oh, it lights up. Oh, maybe they're also addicted to hugs. Oh, and let's show them pictures of puppies. Oh, it lights up. Oh, they're probably a fucking puppy addict too, So the stuff that lights up is it's a reward, right? And so anything that we enjoy, we're getting dopamine, we're getting a reward in our beautiful brains from that thing. And if it happens to be food, or it happens to be watching someone hug a puppy on YouTube, it's the same thing is happening, right? So people who talk about carbohydrates, so carbohydrate addicts.com. This one was funny. As many as 75% of those who are fat are addicted to carbohydrates. Oh, really? Is that so? 75% of fat people are addicted to carbohydrates. Wow, that's such great information. Where did that study come from? Oh, there is no study. Oh, you just saying it. Oh, right. They end with, this craving, reward, negative consequence cycle suggests that yes, carbs are addictive. So let's look at a study. So this study is evidence for sugar addiction, behavioral and neurochemical effects of intermittent excessive sugar intake. And I want to use their definition of addiction. So we can look at, does this sound like what happens with food? They say the diagnostic criteria for addiction can be grouped into 3 stages. Binging, withdrawal, 3 stages. This is not 3 stages, it's more. Anyway, they talk about these are the stages. Okay, grouped into different ones. Okay, so binging, withdrawal, craving, and sensitization. I fucking hate that word. I can never say it right. Sensitization. Okay, so let's talk about them. Binging. All right, so as we know, there are times in our lives where we will binge and it will just be a normal part of life. It was my birthday last week. I was like, okay, well, what am I gonna have for dinner? I'm gonna buy some things I really like. So did I buy something? Yeah. I got an ice cream, and I got a Chinese takeaway, and I ordered from. I really love cinema popcorn, so I ordered from the cinema this popcorn, and it was like this jumbo popcorn, and I was like, oh, it's probably the size of 2 larges. Turns out it was the size of 6 larges. And so I was eating that popcorn, and my Chinese hadn't arrived yet. So I was like eating the popcorn, and then the Chinese arrived. I had some Chinese, and I was like, oh my God, I'm really full. And so I forgot about the ice cream. Anyway, so there we go. That's a binge. I mean, you could suggest that, maybe, a binge is if we're getting into like pathological, like, fast and, other things that are going on to make it more kind of less relaxed than what I was doing, right? I was just like chowing down on some nice food and ate too much for what my body wanted at that time, and that's okay, right? And then we also then have it then moving into something that is a little bit more harmful maybe to my mental health, and that would be moving into BED, so binge eating disorder. And so, we could have signs and symptoms of BED, but not actually like full-blown BED. And I'll talk about that more later, what that looks like. And so, okay, so for the diagnostic criteria of this is binging. Okay, so we know that someone can binge in a way that is not harmful for them, a way that is just a normal part of being a human being, and we also know it's a part of something which is a mental health condition, an eating disorder, and so it is not necessarily addiction. Next is withdrawal. Okay, so let me tell you what we're talking about withdrawal. They use withdrawal from opioids as their criteria. And so does this sound familiar to you when you have eaten food and or whatever it is, sugar, whatever you feel like you might be addicted to? Does this sound familiar of when you haven't had access to that food? Trembling and tremors, muscle pain or aches, hunger or loss of appetite, fatigue, sweating, irritability, agitation, depression, anxiety, nausea, vomiting, confusion, insomnia, paranoia, seizures, dilated pupils. I mean, maybe a few of them. Anxiety, maybe, I don't know. But really, that doesn't sound about right, does it? That doesn't sound about right. That doesn't feel like the experience of what's happening when you are not getting access to this substance, which is sugar or food or whatever. By the way, our bodies need food. Sugar, carbohydrates, right? Our bodies need that. And so, I mean, if you went long enough without eating, you probably would start doing this stuff. But I'm talking about like the kind of, say, between, when you've had your lunch and to having your dinner or whatever. This stuff is not happening because it's not like we need to keep fueling that, quote, addiction, because it's just a normal body function. Eating is like something that we just have to do. And yes, our body will say, hey, I'm hungry, feed me, and different things are happening with our body when we're hungry. But it's not because we're in withdrawal from this, quote, drug, right? Next, they say craving. So craving, they say, often has reference to extreme motivation, which can be measured using operant conditioning. I'd say yes, we could be craving, but I think what we're saying here is the extreme motivation, and I think when we're getting to the extreme motivation, that's when we're getting into eating disorder territory. That's when we're getting into maybe BED, right? It doesn't matter if it's the middle of the night, I'm going to go drive to my 24-hour supermarket and buy the things that I want. And again, that's not addiction, that is falling into BED, binge eating disorder. Sensitization. Let me read what they say here. Behavioral sensitization is typically measured as an increased locomotion in response to repeated administrations of a drug. For example, after repeated doses of amphetamine followed by abstinence, a challenge dose, which has little or no effect in naive animals, caused marked hyperactivity. Animals sensitized to one substance often show cross-sensitization, which is defined as an increased locomotor response to a different drug or substance. Cross-sensitization can also be manifest in consumatory behavior. Animals sensitized to one drug may show increased intake of a different drug. In other words, one drug acts as a gateway to another. So if we think about this, what this is saying in plain language is you build a tolerance for food and then you can't get enough, and then you are going to cross over into needing other substances because, you know, eating food just doesn't do it for you anymore, and, you know, you eat 75, I don't know, Twinkies in an hour, and it's not enough. And that's not what happens, right? That probably doesn't sound familiar to you, where you one day will be having one square of chocolate, and then the next day it's like, okay, well, now I'm on to 75 packs of chocolate, you know, because my tolerance is built up. And now, I forget food. That food was such a, you know, that does nothing for me anymore. Now I'm using different substances. Like, that's not what happens. And this is what they're talking about, right? They're talking about this. And then this study is a study that they've done on, guess what they did it on? They did it on rats. Oh, rats, the poor rats. And they're like, oh, rats like sugar water, and they'll choose sugar water over plain water. Well, fucking no shit. How rats don't live in a world that says if you eat sugar water you're a piece of shit, and have mums who say you look a bit fat, or you know, live in a society that values them for their appearance. They're rats. They're going to be like, okay, how can I live longer? I'm going to get, as you know, this nice juicy sweet water because it fucking tastes good. We're not rats, right? Okay, so if we think about the Dietland swing, so the Dietland swing is restriction to binge. If you think about a swing, if you pull it up in restriction, it has to go down and it's going to go into binge. And so you restrict, binge, and the more you pull it up into restrict, the more it's going to go over into binge. And that's restriction physically and mentally. And restriction makes you fixated on food. It makes food taste more delicious. And one thing that it does is it increases our appetites when we restrict. The hormones that make us feel hungry increase. Ghrelin is made in the stomach, and it stimulates hunger by entering the brain and acting on the neurons in the hypothalamus to increase the activity of the hunger-causing nerve cells and reducing the activity of hunger-inhibiting cells. And as the stomach empties, the release of ghrelin increases. The hormones that make us feel full, what do you think? They go down. So you're really craving food. Leptin is the most powerful appetite suppressing hormone and is made in fat cells. And so if we're not eating food and our bodies is like, okay, what can I do to make them eat? I'm gonna make them feel really, really hungry, and even if they eat, I'm gonna make them feel hungry still because we don't have food. Also, your body will make the sight, sound, taste and smell of food increase. It'll just make it way more appetizing, and so you'll be like, oh my god, I'm just salivating. I just walked by a food store and I'm fucking salivating. What's wrong with me? That's your body being like, hello, feed me, give me that thing that you've said that we're not allowed to have. and your metabolism slows down. The other thing is that your muscle mass decreases and your fat mass increases because muscle uses more energy. So we don't need our body to be burning more energy. We need to be burning less energy if we're literally starving. And so you don't want to move your body as much. And so that's going to add to it. You're going to be like, oh my God, I'm so lazy. I just can't be bothered to do anything. I'm addicted to food. I don't want to move my body. I'm just a piece of shit. And all of this can be really alarming and feel like addiction and feel like we're just out of control and food has this grip on us and just really distressing. So, was I addicted to food in the past? Well, I was addicted to food in the same way that I'm addicted to breathing air. I was addicted to food in the same way I'm addicted to drinking water, the same way I'm addicted to sleeping or having a nice poo, you know? It's a normal body function, and the moment that you were denied that, then you were going to need more of it. And if we look about the definition of addiction, addiction is a brain disorder characterized by compulsive engagement in rewarding stimuli despite adverse consequences. Well, people are saying, well, the adverse consequences is fatness. But we know that some folks can eat food and never gain weight. They really struggle with it, and they're really struggling to keep weight on. And so would they be a food addict? Because they don't have, quote, adverse consequences. But what about if someone is already fat and they are, quote, a food addict, but they don't put on any other weight? Are they a food addict then? Or is that not a food addict? Because it seems like rewarding stimuli despite adverse consequences, and it's a framing of fatness as an adverse consequence and a framing of eating food as a direct tie to gaining weight, and we know it's actually a lot more complicated than that. The reasons why people are fat are in the hundreds. Yeah, all of this stuff, it's enough to make you feel irrational and desperate and unbalanced and feeling addicted. So really, when I was in that feeling like I was addicted stage, what I was experiencing was binge eating disorder. And binge eating disorder is seen as this sister to bulimia, but without the purging. And so folks who experience BED may have a compulsion to eat more food than their body currently needs in one session, to the point where they feel like it's a problem and they feel like it's disordered. As humans, we all binge all the time, right? As I discussed, and it's totally normal. The difference is the restriction phase and the guilt and the feeling of compulsion and maybe eating alone or in secret or having binge foods, or maybe not even enjoying the food or the taste, just eating. And it's actually the most prevalent eating disorder in adults, and it's still a relatively new concept. It was only formally recognized in 2013. 1 to 3% of the population have BED, and is spread equally between men and women. We have no good information on gender non-conforming, non-binary, or trans people, but we do know gender queer folks experience EDs more than other groups, probably due to the stress of living in a marginalized body. When I was growing up, there was anorexia and bulimia, right? As in, that's what the general public talked about. And what an eating disorder looked like to me was a thin white teenage girl who was not eating enough food. But the reality is that eating disorders come in many different forms, and they're indiscriminate, right? Anyone can have an eating disorder. And the difference between disordered eating and an eating disorder is the impact it's having on your life. And so you remember I said before, like, I think, most people in our society engages in some type of disordered eating. And I think that the someone could be engaging in daily restriction, for example, and it have a massive amount of impact on their life and their mental health, whereas someone else could be engaging in the exact same behaviors and it could be okay for them, right? And so we could be engaging in the same behaviors and it just not have an impact or have an impact. And it's about how much it's impacting your life. And people who have BED tend to have higher levels of body dissatisfaction and lower self-esteem, and it's linked to being restrictive with food, aka dieting. And it can be a method for coping with other issues. So what about sugar? So studies have shown no conclusive evidence that sugar is addictive for humans. So if you think about what behaviors someone who is addicted to a substance display, are we displaying them with sugar? Are we hitting rock bottom and stealing and ending up in prison because of the things that you're needing to do to meet up with the supply of food or sugar that you need to hit because your tolerance is getting more and more? No, we're not seeing that, right? And if you were addicted to sugar, you'd be addicted to sugar in all forms, right? You'd be addicted to drinking ketchup or, eating mangoes or iced tea, right? But it's when we often think about sugar addiction, we think about things that are, quote, the bad foods, right? What diet culture has told us are the bad foods versus just sugar, eating a sugar cube. The big thing here to think about is that symptoms of addiction increase with more access to the substance you're addicted to. Okay, so if you're taking more of something that is actually addictive, you're smoking cigarettes, you're smoking 10 a day, and then you're like, oh, let's go, I've got a 20 pack, I'm going to do 20. You're going to become more addicted, right? And so the next day you're going to have a 20 pack again because the 10 is not going to do it for you. Whereas symptoms of food addiction or sugar addiction decrease and disappear with more access to sugar and food. So the more we allow ourselves to eat sugar, eat food, the less those feelings of addiction are present. And that is the big difference, is the source of feeling addicted is restriction. Also, you don't need drugs. You do need sugar. You do need food. Our brains need sugar and carbs to function. Glucose, a form of sugar, is the primary source of energy for every cell in the body. The less sugar you eat, the more you're going to crave it. So, no, we're probably not addicted to food or to sugar. Right? I think about it too, I've used this analogy before about, imagine if we were free divers and we were holding our breath and going down as deep as possible, coming back to the surface. The first thing that we're going to do is gasp for air. Take a deep breath in because we have been starved of that air. Our body is saying, get to that surface, hurry up, quick, breathe, taking a big gulp because we haven't had air for X long. And our bodies are doing the same with food, with sugar, those things that we need in our bodies. And when you restrict, it's like you're going diving. You can't stay down there forever or you'll die. And so we need to surface. And the more we say, there's something wrong with me because I took a deep breath. And the deep breath is binging. Is eating foods that we have decided is bad. the more we say that is wrong and pathologize it, the more we're going to try and force ourselves to be living under the water. But like, just stay under the water longer and you won't need to breathe as much. But it doesn't work like that, because we need to breathe or we'll be dead. We need to eat or we'll be dead. We need sugar or we'll be dead. Yeah. So let's give a roundup of everything that we've talked about right now. So, is food or sugar addiction real? So if you think about food all the time and maybe you count down the minutes until you can eat again, or you have a preference for foods that you label as bad or sugar-filled or unhealthy, this can feel really distressing and can feel like we're addicted, like there's something really wrong with us. However, there isn't any evidence to show that what happens in our brains is addiction in the same way as other substances. Our reward centers in our brains do light up, but they are the same ones that light up when we hug someone we love, or we watch a funny video, or we see a cute puppy. And the big reason why people feel addicted to sugar, because we really can feel addicted to sugar or food, is one, they are restricting that food or sugar, or two, they actually have an eating disorder. And for both scenarios, the food addiction symptoms will decrease and hopefully disappear when we fully, physically and mentally allow ourselves those things into our lives, that sugar, that food. And that's a big difference with substance addiction. The opposite happens. So the more substances are actually addictive that you have in your life, the more you consume them, those addictive feelings increase because they are actually addictive. Whereas with food, with sugar, the more access we have to it, those addiction feelings decrease the more we allow ourselves. And that's a big difference between something that's actually addictive and something that just feels addictive. So no, food or sugar addiction isn't real, but it can really feel like it when we restrict ourselves. So hopefully we can put that one to bed. We can say, okay, really I just need to I know if you're really struggling and you're feeling like out of control, it would be, if you can, it'd be a really good idea to go and talk to a mental health professional if that's available for you. And big compassion, because this stuff is like the rhetoric we have around addiction, one, around food and eating too much of it, two, and around fatness, three, like imagine that amount of, I don't even need to say imagine. A lot of us have felt it, that amount of shame is overwhelming and powerful and sucks, right? And so if you're in that position, then I sending out love to you, all the love to you, and hoping that you can find some comfort and some peace, and know that you're not alone. The most prevalent eating disorder is binge eating disorder, and also heads up, fat people can be anorexic, and it's not normal. It is normal for people to be stressed around food, but really we should have a peaceful relationship with food if possible. So alright, well, thanks for hanging out with me today. I appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next episode. Stay fierce, fatty. See you in a while, alligator.